I have opened up to my dad about you. The weight of the secret had been pressing on my chest for weeks. Every time I sat across from my dad at the dinner table, every time he asked me how I was doing, I felt it clawing at the back of my throat. I needed to tell him, but how? I knew how he was stern, practical, a man who believed that love should follow logic, that emotions, while important, should never outweigh reason. And in his mind, reason meant tradition, and she wasn't what he would have expected. That evening, I finally gathered the courage. Dad was in his usual spot in the living room, reading a book with his glasses resting low on his nose. The soft glow of the lamp made the lines on his face seem deeper, and for a moment I wondered if I was about to add even more to them. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady despite my nerves. He glanced up. Of course. I sat across from him, hands clasped together. "It's about someone," I began. "Someone important to me." His expression remained neutral, but I saw the slight shift in his posture. "I've met someone," I continued, watching his reaction carefully, "and I love her." The silence stretched for a few beats. "You've never mentioned her before," he said at last. I nodded. "I know, because I wasn't sure how you'd feel." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" I exhaled, steadying myself. "Because she's not from here. She doesn't share our background, our customs. She sees the world differently than we do." I waited for a reaction, a flicker of disapproval, a sharp intake of breath, but he remained still, unreadable. "She makes me happy. She challenges me, makes me think differently about life. And I wanted you to know, because this isn't just a passing thing. She's the one." Dad placed his book down on the table. For the first time I saw something in his eyes, something I couldn't quite decipher. "Do you believe she understands what it means to be with you?" he asked. "Yes," I answered, without hesitation. "And do you understand what it means to bring her into this family?" I nodded. "I do." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "This won't be easy, you know." "I know," I admitted. Then he leaned forward, studying me carefully. "Do you love her enough to fight for this?" His question caught me off guard, but I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, "I do." Dad held my gaze for a long moment, before nodding slowly. "Then let's talk about it." It wasn't approval, not yet, but it wasn't rejection either. The conversation had shifted. The moment I feared, outright rejection, hadn't come. But I knew we weren't in the clear yet. My dad wasn't the kind of man who made decisions based on emotions alone. He was testing me, trying to see if I understood the weight of what I was saying. He leaned back, clasping his hands together. "Tell me about her," he said. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "She's intelligent, strong-willed. She doesn't back down from a challenge. But she's also kind, thoughtful." I hesitated before adding, "She sees the world differently than we do. But I think that's what makes her special. She makes me better." Dad nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "And does she know about everything?" I knew what he meant. The expectations, the pressures, the weight of the family name, and the responsibilities that came with it. "She does," I said, "and she's ready for it." He studied me, his expression unreadable. "Love is one thing," he said after a moment. "But marriage is a lifetime. You say she's ready, but is she willing? When difficulties come, when the world reminds you both of your differences, will she stand beside you?" I had asked myself the same question many times before. I wasn't naive. I knew love wasn't enough on its own, but I had seen it in her eyes, in the way she stood by me when things were difficult. "She's not the type to run," I said. Dad exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "And her family, do they accept this?" I hesitated. It wasn't easy at first, I admitted. They had their concerns, just like you do. But over time they saw what we have, and that changed things. He considered my words. And you think the same will happen here? I hope so, I said honestly, but even if it doesn't, it won't change how I feel. For the first time that evening, a faint smile crossed his lips. You're more like your mother than I realized, he murmured. I blinked, caught off guard. She was stubborn like you, he continued. Determined, willing to fight for what she believed in. When I met her, my parents weren't happy either. They thought she was too different, that our marriage would be difficult, and they were right. I frowned slightly. So, why did you go through with it? His gaze softened. Because I knew no matter what, she was worth it. His words hung between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. After a long pause, he sighed. I won't say I'm completely convinced, but I will say this. You believe in her, and I believe in you. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. So, let me meet her. I exhaled, not realizing I had been holding my breath. You will? He nodded. If she's going to be a part of this family, then I need to see for myself. Relief flooded through me. It wasn't a full acceptance yet, but it was more than I had hoped for. This was only the beginning. The next few days were filled with anxious anticipation. The moment had come. I was about to introduce her to my father. She was nervous, though she tried to hide it. I could tell by the way she kept smoothing out imaginary wrinkles in her dress, the way her fingers lingered on the hem of her sleeve. You look perfect, I assured her, squeezing her hand. She exhaled sharply. It's not about how I look, she murmured. I know how much this means to you. I nodded, and it means a lot to me that you're here, willing to do this. She met my gaze, her eyes filled with quiet strength. For you, always, that was all I needed to hear. We arrived at my father's house, a place I knew so well, yet somehow it felt different this time. The air was heavier, the walls taller, the silence louder. Dad was waiting in the dining room, seated at the head of the long oak table that had been in our family for generations. The room smelled of freshly brewed tea and old books, the familiar scent doing little to ease the tension in my chest. He rose when we entered, his expression unreadable. She hesitated only briefly before stepping forward, extending her hand. It's an honor to meet you, she said, her voice steady. He studied her for a moment before shaking her hand. Likewise, we sat, and for a long moment, silence stretched between us. My father, always composed, always measured, took his time observing her, not in a rude way, but in the way a man does when he's trying to see beyond the surface. She didn't fidget under his gaze. She didn't shrink or falter. She met his eyes with quiet confidence, waiting for him to speak first. Finally, he leaned forward. Tell me about yourself. She smiled, and I could see the careful thought she put into her response. Well, I'm sure you already know a lot from what he's told you. But if you're asking who I am at my core, I'd say I'm someone who values honesty, respect, and loyalty. I wasn't born into the kind of life your family has, but I know what it means to work hard, to fight for what matters. Dad nodded slowly. And my son, why do you love him? She didn't hesitate, because he's not afraid to be real with me. He listens. He challenges me in ways that make me better. And he believes in me, even when I struggle to believe in myself. A flicker of something unreadable passed through my father's expression. Approval, curiosity. Then he surprised me. And what do you fear most about being with him? I turned sharply to her, but she didn't seem caught off guard. Instead, she took a deep breath before answering, that I won't be enough. The honesty in her voice stunned me. That I won't live up to what he deserves, or what this family expects. She glanced at me briefly, before looking back at my father. But that fear won't stop me from trying. For a long moment, my father said nothing. He simply studied her, as if weighing the truth in her words. Then, at last, he nodded. I appreciate your honesty, he said, and I respect your courage. Relief flooded through me. Dinner went on, the tension slowly easing. My father still had his reservations. I could see that, but I also saw something else. He was giving her a chance, and that was more than I could have hoped for. As dinner continued, the conversation gradually shifted. My father, always the reserved and calculating man, began to ask her more personal questions, not to interrogate, but to understand. You mentioned hard work earlier, he said, setting his teacup down. Tell me about your family. What values did they instill in you? She straightened her posture slightly. My parents weren't wealthy, but they were rich in principles. They taught me that respect is earned, not given. That love isn't just words but actions, and that no matter where you come from, dignity is something you should never compromise. I stole a glance at my father, watching for a reaction. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable as always. And how do you handle adversity? He asked next. A small smile played at the corners of her lips. By standing my ground, I don't run from problems. I face them. There was a brief pause. Then, to my surprise, my father let out a quiet chuckle. I see why my son admires you, he said, leaning back in his chair. You remind me of someone I once knew. That caught my attention. My father rarely spoke about the past, let alone about anyone who had left an impact on him. Who? I asked. His eyes flickered toward me before he exhaled through his nose. Your mother. A silence fell over the table. Heavier than before, she looked at me, as if unsure whether to speak. I reached for her hand, under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. She was strong-willed, my father continued, his voice softer than usual. I didn't understand her at first, but in time I realized that strength like hers was rare. There was something nostalgic in his tone, something I hadn't heard in a long time. For the first time that night, I saw his walls come down. She fought for what she believed in. He went on, glancing at her. Much like you, she swallowed, sitting up a little straighter. That's a compliment I don't take lightly. A small